Welcome back, Beyonders, to Winning Warcry, a tabletop and beyond podcast. We are so happy to have you here today. Dan Herrera is in the house with us per the usual, but we've got special guests with us, Javi Martinez, also known as Diomedan on the Warcry servers. You've probably seen him. He is a lover of pleasure and pain, and we are happy to have him on the show. Thank you, Javi, for being here.
Yeah, man. Thanks for inviting me. It's cool.
Yeah, we. I think this is the first time you've been on our show for this one. So
first time I've been on any show.
Really?
Yeah.
All right. Well, just remember who brought you here first, buddy.
Right. It's either very surprising or completely not. So.
Well, when you make it big one day, just remember us little guys.
I'll know when I started. Yep.
Yep.
Exactly. Well, we have a super duper busy show for you guys today. There's like a ton of Warcry news that dropped, which, Dan, I'm going to be honest with you, this should have come out this weekend, given our normal schedule, where we record and all the news comes out afterwards. So
this is the first time it's ever happened where it came out right before the pod instead of right after. It's wonderful.
Maybe they've been listening. So thank you, James Workshop, for listening to our show. Yeah, we got tons of news today. We've got Vulkyn Flameseekers that we're going to be talking about, and a topic that is really dear to Dan's heart and my heart, tournament scoring objectives and what looks good and, maybe what we should avoid. So let's get into it. Of course, we're going to start out with our hobby table. So, Dan, why don't you kick us off with your hobby table? What you got going on?
I'm finally returning to doing a lot of painting. Just in the last couple weeks, I painted a Witherlord. I'm working on a Nurgle Varangard. I just painted a little Ironjaw's Brewgit, who is painted to match. So he's Brewgitty in that he's got this little cup of here, let me point it at the camera. There's purple drink in that cup. He matches my Mega Boss real nice.
Yep.
And was really excited to find an Ironjaw's Brewgit on Etsy. I couldn't believe it when I found it. And then I'm assembling today's topic. Just assembled a little Rune Father. He's got a bell in front of his face, so he can't see anything. I didn't notice that when they first previewed the models. I don't know if I'll cut that off or not, but he's pretty sweet. And then this unplayable dog is very, very cute. I just finished building it.
Well, I can't wait to try the tabletop simulator all dog list. And just, there's your meme list for you.
There are some pets that you can do the all pet list, but I don't think the dog is one of them.
No.
Fair enough. Awesome. Well, it sounds like you got your hands full for sure. Very good, though. Javi, what's on your hobby table?
Well, I just finished up some Slanesh Sybarites for an upcoming tournament on Saturday. I'll be taking a Lord of Pain, a True Blood. What else is in there? Slake Slash, a Fiend Blood, and then 3 Homunculi. So it's a bit of a speedy list with some punch in there in the net. So I was working on those for the past couple of weeks. I also did assemble my own set of dwarves. I like the Flameseekers a lot. We'll talk about it in a minute, but you really only need one box of them. There's really no reason to get a second one.
I know that we said that you should talk about the tournament later. I mean, you just mentioned your list now. Why don't you just here? I'm going to pull it up for you. So why don't you talk about what you?
Yeah. So in that picture, Vasilak is standing in for a True Blood.
Okay.
But yeah, so I was. It's kind of similar to a list I ran at the Tabletop Beyond tournament. Was it in February or March of this year? But I had a Myrmidon instead. So I'm looking to get some speed and projection, and then with the Fiend Bloods and Slake Slash, and then some control with that net, and then the Lord of Pain is just kind of going to sit in the middle and be a bully.
I like it. So there's only 7 models here.
Yeah.
which in my opinion, is kind of like a minimum tournament number, just given like, some of the hordes list. How do you like with your little homunculi, right, that you got there?
Never. You should know never to underestimate a homunculi or homunculus.
We did we did do okay on that.
You've done extensive testing, and they are okay.
They are okay. Yeah.
Yeah. No. So the mission pack, it's for the tournament that's being run by Kyle, who's the Great White Nope on Discord, and Rob, who's Girth Demon. It's over at Red Seal Gaming, somewhere in New Jersey, that I'll have to figure out before now and Friday. And the mission pack is, I think it's one of those really good mission packs where hordes and elite lists and everything in between have some play. So the first mission is power struggle, but the secondary is most wounds in the middle. So a big bulky warband can kind of hold that middle and two objectives and still get a lot of points, and the horde list is gonna have to figure out how to push them off. Second is loot and pillage, with if you drop a treasure, your opponent gets 3 points. So again, I think you really want some bulky fighters there, otherwise you're not going to be holding any treasure. Although, whatever your strategy is there, it might change depending on what your makeup is. After that, it's Reaper with the four corners secondary, and then which Reaper kind of favors the big heavy hitters, and then the final is ley lines with blood marked secondary. Mm-hmm. So the one where you get points if the target you mark is on an objective holding treasure or is killed. So I just think smaller, more elite warbands have a lot of play. So I'm giving it a try.
Yeah, I mean, one of kind of the list building 101 thing is that you try to have 3, threats, one in each deployment, and I think you've got 4 significant threats here. So,
and there's 75 points for blessing, so this is another test for blessings too, because I mean, if you put an extra attack on the fiend blood, you're within, you're getting the average damage of a slake horn for 20 to 30 fewer points.
Yeah.
And you're losing 5 wounds. Like that's a pretty decent trade-off that lets you get some other stuff going.
Yeah, for sure. Well, good luck at the tournament. Good luck to Rob and Kyle, who are running it. I know this is their first time that they're running it, and I have a lot of confidence that they're going to do a great job with it. They've asked a lot of people who have run tournaments like opinions and like what they should be doing and all that stuff. And so it seems like they're really putting their heart and soul into it. And I'm excited for them to see what they think about GMing, or I guess like being the TO for a pretty good tournament. So and here's to more to come, right? We were talking earlier, Javi, about like how big Warcry might be if it didn't come out right during the pandemic. And, it doesn't matter at this point. I mean, that's like what ifs and, maybe coulda, woulda, shouldas. But like if we are doing more and more tournaments or events and things like that now, like it just will continue to grow from here. So that's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
It's a good group of guys.
Yeah, awesome. My hobby table is actually just around the corner in my laundry room. I've got 2 3D printers that have been going like nonstop for like the last week. And I think, I don't know if you guys know this, but I had a New Year's resolution on one of our podcasts last January to like wage war on the Eternal Gray. The eternal war on gray. And I can tell you
printing more gray for yourself.
Yeah.
He uses blue resin, actually.
Yeah, there we go.
That's his trick.
So I'll tell you guys that the crusade this year on the gray has been going strong. And like I've been doing really good. I've been knocking out like boxes that like have been lingering. Like for example, like you'll do like the 2 warbands for a box, but not the terrain. Or like a warband and the terrain, but not the other warband. And so I've just been like knocking out these like kind of laggard things that I've been trying to do. One of my big ones right now is the Cursed City box. Like I only have like 3 more minis of that box to paint, but I haven't based any of them. So like none of my skeletons, none of my zombies that I've been using for like, the the Soulblight Gravelord lists are like based at all. Like none of them are based, and so I've been printing out some great city cobblestone bases I got off of Miniature Market, or not Miniature Market, my miniature factory,
Yeah.
and just been printing them like crazy. And then I printed like a nice like box organizer for the actual Curse City box. So all my tokens are in this like nice little compartmented thing that holds all the cards. Like all the tiles are in this nice compartmented thing. And so then I printed out some like miniature trays that I can slide the guys in, and now they're all like just arranged in the box in a really nice spot. So I don't play Curse City all that often. It's actually a great game for people that haven't played it. I really liked it. I wish they would have supported a lot more like they did with the Blackstone Fortress, right? But it's a
It
fun
does
game.
seem to be a difficult box to finish. I have a friend that I think's been working on that box for over 2 years.
Yeah, there's a lot of miniatures in there, right? And so you have to be ready to batch paint a lot. So, but I'm gonna knock this thing out, and that'll be just like give me a nice sense of accomplishment that this thing that's been staring at me from the shelf, being like, "Oh, you idiot, you haven't finished me yet." Like, go buy more minis or something. You know how our pile of shame does it to us, does us dirty. So, so anyway, but that's been like my geek week, or a geek week, my hobby table, right? Like I've been just knocking that kind of stuff out and feeling pretty good. The best part though is that my wife was like taking a dig at me the other day. She's like, "You get all these like 3D printer stuff, and you you use it once and you never use it." And my 10-year-old daughter goes, "What are you talking about, Mom? That thing's been going for like 4 days straight." She's like, "It's actually really annoying. Every time I have to do the laundry, it's like beep, 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 beep." Like, and so I'm just like, vindication. So yeah, it was pretty funny. So, but it's been pretty good hobby table. Awesome. All right. Well, let's get to some news here.
It's not some news. It's literally all of the news.
All of the news. We have
It's
as
all.
much news in the last 2 days as we've had. Well, I don't know. We had a lot of
It's the
news
biggest
a
news
month-
since Blessings.
Yeah.
It's
Even bigger than
significant,
that.
and there's a
This is
bunch of it,
huge.
right? So, Dan, why don't you kick us off with the first one? I'll see if I can
Yeah,
pull up the thing.
so I love the French. I love their, lack of organization and their confusion about calendars. I'm very thankful to all of them. Well, we don't know if it was the French or the French Canadians, but somebody uploaded a PDF to the French Downloads website that has a whole bunch of Cities of Sigmar rules for all the humans, all the elves, all the dwarves, and it's incredible. I mean, it's an entire 3 factions essentially. When I first read it, I assumed that it was just replacing profiles and abilities. It's a little bit confusing because it's Cities of Sigmar, Order Castellans, Cities of Sigmar Dispossessed, Cities of Sigmar Darkling Covens, and it's a little bit ambiguous about whether or not we can mix and match them, if these are just 3 separate factions or whether these are kind of related subfactions of each other. It doesn't fully explain it, so we'll probably need to wait until they actually release it and give us like the actual article and everything on it's dated for 11/9, so that'll be not this Friday but next Friday. But wonderful leak. And we don't have to feel bad because GW leaked it themselves, right?
I mean, it's still up there, right? I literally just pulled it up, like for us to look at, right? That's under the miscellaneous.
Dan, they don't watch your show, Dan.
Yeah, so
they would have seen the whole reveal.
Yeah, so it's probably too early right now to get into all of the ups and downs of each faction. People are kind of going into the various translations and getting into this. Some of the fighters look pretty interesting. There's like a burger wizard who's really really good.
Burger Wizard.
Burger de Armas, I think, is Ana de
Uh,
Armas's sort of weird nerdy brother.
Your
And
French is magnifique, magnifique.
um, I got in a little bit of trouble for horribly mispronouncing some of these names on my show. I apologize to all the Quebecois who I've offended.
So
Anyone else?
it's so funny. The Berger des Âmes is the soul herder,
Oh,
right?
okay.
Or the
Yeah,
soul
Soul
shepherd.
Shepherd.
Like,
Yeah, that's what
yeah,
I was
soul
told.
shepherd.
Soul Shepherd.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
So I
So
screwed that up. I'm sorry.
it's okay.
I love Montreal. I've been there many times. It's a beautiful city. I love it. Uh, um, but they do look like, the humans are probably going to be competitively viable. The dwarves might be as well, although it's a completely different. It's going to be a completely different approach than Dispossessed have had in the past, which is the real news, I think, out of this, because these guys are on a different points algorithm
Mm-hmm.
than current
Oh,
Warcry models are, which is really cool. All the Darkling Covens, their abilities are trash, but the profiles all came down a bunch of points and are like really good now. The humans have a lot of weird profiles, but in general, it seems like it's on a different algorithm. The dwarves seem like they're on a different algorithm. And then this kind of dovetails into just today, they released rules for the Black Talons,
yeah,
and they're a whole new faction. It's not just five
right.
random Stormcast being shunted into Thunderstrike or something. No, it's an entire faction of Stormcast. Um,
Well,
and they are
they're like an underworld's warband because they're all named characters, but they're a bespoke.
Yeah,
right, right,
It's
right.
weird.
And they're going to be kind of hard to build with because they're all unique. So you can only take one of each. So any kind of cutting you can do, you can't double up on any of them. So they'll be a little bit hard to build with, but that's probably what it should be for like a weird lore faction that's kind of off on the side. But um, some of them are really good, and that's
yeah.
kind of cool. And they're also just on a different points algorithm than current Stormcast are on. So there's some speculation that maybe this means we'll be seeing a points update sometime in the next, 6 months when they get around to publishing it. But like it seems like they've got a points update in the bag, and
Yeah.
whether they choose to publish it via FAQ or via Tome of Champions is up to them, and that's really cool. I'm really excited for it.
That to me is the biggest news. Now, I'm not a like I didn't go out and get the Cities of Sigmar like book for Age of Sigmar, right? Like
Mhm.
I don't play cities there, and I haven't played Age of Sigmar in a little while. But I found it interesting that they have basically condensed cities down into 3 cities. Like Anvil
Yeah,
Guard's gone, the Living Cities is gone, right? Like there's like it's very different, and I think that that's a good thing because it was almost like too much. You had too many options with
I agree.
cities, and the fact that you could sort of mix and match and choose things, and like some of them kind of naturally wanted to be certain things and some of them didn't want to be, and I think now it's just much more clear what it
Mhm.
can be. And I noticed they got rid of a lot of models. Like you don't see
They
the
did.
lordling in there anymore. That used to be like the favorite little ally that you could throw in there for 90 points. It would give you the swift as the wind
Yep.
ability, and so they got rid
They
of
cut
some of
about
those.
half the elves. Mhm.
Yeah, exactly. So and a lot of the humans are just like gone. I mean, those were like very legacy Warhammer like fantasy battle like
Oh, you mean
models.
like all the old Germans? Yeah, they
Yep.
got rid of all the Germans.
Yeah. Yep.
Um,
Yep. Exactly. So with the new like line update, right? That updated all the humans for sure. And the dwarves, the dispossessed dwarves, they didn't have a lot going on for them anyway.
which is too
Although it
bad. I
was
really like the Dispossessed. I'd love to
yeah,
see kind of updated approach at like what what GW wants to do with their Tolkien-y dwarves. Because if they're not going to cut them, like if they wanted to cut them, they would have cut them because they got rid of Wanderers, which is like, how do you get rid of Wood Elves? To me, like Wood Elves
yeah,
are the core of fantasy, right? But
yeah,
they just didn't feel like they belonged anymore. Now, I've heard people
Yeah, they're
say that means they're bringing out Kurnothi like in 2024, but we don't know that for sure, right?
right.
So who knows?
Yeah. Yeah. I was gonna say, oh no, they cut the gyro bomber and the gyrocopter, but I didn't scroll down far enough. So
Unfortunately, they did not cut the
they're still
gyrocopter and
there.
the
Those
gyro
ugly,
bomber.
ugly models. So
Oh, I think they're pretty when done really well, but they're so bad. They're just so bad.
yeah, they're
Did
horrible.
they get a points change? They did actually get a little bit of a points drop, I think. I might be making that up. I'll have to
I
re-enter
don't have my book
everything
in
into
front
the
of me,
spreadsheet of
but
mine.
yeah. Anyway, so but yeah, I mean, I think it's a good thing, right? Like this is I think a leaned out Cities of Sigmar is a good thing, and I think that they suffered from too much bloat before, where it was hard to kind of figure out what kind of list you wanted to make with them, So
Yeah, and it was weird when there were only there were 6 cities, which is so many, but only 2 of them were good. And then it's
yeah,
like, if you aren't online way too much, then you probably don't know that you only need to read 2 of them. And then it's like you're just going through this awful novel. Anyway,
right.
I laughed a little bit before because the gyrocopter did go down points, 5, only 5.
Oh,
So it's
okay.
still
Well,
Well, now it's totally playable.
yeah.
Who doesn't want a 12 move flyer?
that's hilarious. Yeah, exactly. As far as the Black Talon stuff, I think there's some really interesting stuff out there. This is obviously kind of like, well, it was officially leaked, right? Like they haven't come out with really any articles about this. This was like on the show that they do, their Warhammer show. So it's not like it was a surprise potato camera surprise or anything like that. It was like officially kind of announced without being announced. And so I imagine in the next week or so we'll get more stuff about that. But keep your eyes on it because I think that there are some really interesting things in there, and we'll dive deeper into that when we do more of a faction focus on them. So we're not going to spend our time, breaking them down because that's what our Vulkyn Flameseekers are for today. But
Yeah,
before we get
next
there, is there
month
any?
we'll either do Black Talons or we'll do one of
Yeah,
these cities things,
yeah,
for sure.
totally,
I won't get through
totally.
all of them this winter.
Yeah,
I'm just interested in the 7 move leader. That's
I know,
crazy.
right?
That's
Yeah,
that
She's a
Stormcast can
beast.
sprint.
She's a
yeah,
beast. Well, I mean, that was like her model, right? Like she was like mid sprint with 2 axes for like the longest time, right?
yeah. And she was one of
So
the only move 5 Stormcasts you could get, but now she's leveled up from 5 to 7.
that's what happens when you don't skip leg day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she's
You know?
all leg day. She is 100% leg day.
Yep.
She's not quite as thick as Ilariel, though.
Yeah, that's true.
Like Ilariel's got some thighs. Whoa, that
Well,
girl's thick.
Alariel is doing like max squats,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
Nave and Calthea are just doing burpees, like they're
right.
just
Yeah,
in there
they're the
Yeah,
doing
they're
hit
going for a
workout
burpees.
real
girls.
endurance there. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, hit workouts for sure for those ladies.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, so Dan, you TO'd 2 tourneys and you got another one coming up, huh? Give us the rundown.
I did. It was really fun. So first, really exciting. Javi has been a really big part of this. You've been in it as well, Justin.
Mhm.
TTS, the mod for Warcry is working incredibly well now. It's just like they've got it just humming like a well-oiled machine, and so you can just play Warcry on Tabletop Simulator. It's like its own video game now. I mean, it's incredible the stuff that the 2 mods for it have done. Ziggy, Hood, we love you. You're amazing.
We
Um,
love you guys
so
so much.
Yeah.
so people were just like kind of talking about, um, like the mod is working well. Why don't we have anything? And I just kind of offered to host it. And it worked really well. We had 14 players, and then the next month we had 20 players, and then it looks like this month we'll have 14 players again. So we're having these monthly TTS leagues, which are really, really cool. We'll be able to get like, you know, online standings of all these TTS tournaments. We can combine them at the end of the year, something like that. I mean, it's just really awesome, and it's a really great way to like test out weird concepts, weird lists that you would never be able to run in person, stuff like that. I also got to TO an in-person tournament um, in Roseville, Minnesota, and a bunch of the Dogs of Warcry folks came up. One of them won it. If anybody knows Eric from Dogs of Warcry, he is
Yeah.
literally the example that in our podcast where you wanted to do an invitational, I was like, well, you can't have a tournament of the 30 best Warcry players without bringing Eric Oakland to the tournament. But he would never go to an invitational, and then he proved me right by just coming up and beating all the Minnesotans in our own tournament. So that was cool to watch. He basically had it was like Order's version of a Chimera Nurgle list. He went Living City and all Iron Breakers, so that because Living City has the reaction where they can run away after one attack. It's
Yeah.
like the Hunters of Huanchi reaction, but they're dwarves, so they're better than Hunters of Huanchi fighters are. And then just a big Charybdis. So it was like I have the best smalls and the best tall,
Yeah.
on the board most of the time.
The long and
And
short of it.
I
yeah,
mean, he's
yeah.
been tuning that list for a while, hasn't he? I know at least the Charybdis has been out there for a while for him.
He's been playing various versions of the Charybdis, and his dwarves are Necromunda dwarves, so he can kind of play them as anything he wants, which is really helpful. If you want flexibility, doing a little bit of conversions can really help you that way. So he's been playing around with a few different dispossessed lists with the Charybdis, and they play a lot of weird stuff, and I think it really helps them in Madison,
Yeah.
um, because they get into the weird nooks and crannies of the game. I think they come up with a lot of stuff that not a lot of other people like. The online discourse doesn't touch a lot of the stuff they come up with because they're just like iterating and playing so much, um, which is really cool. And
Yeah, weird
most
jank eventually can turn into a nice tuned tournament list.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
If
true.
you like, yeah, you start with something weird and then you trim the edges of it, trim the fat off of it, and you can really get something. So, yeah, congrats to Eric. It was really fun. It was really cool seeing a lot of the new players see how the Madison players play when they're trying to win, um, and kind of made some of the newer players think about like how one actually plays, like
Mm.
what the difference is between a pickup game and a playing to win game, which was really cool because when I play with them casually on like a weekly basis, I don't play to win, and so we only have a few tournaments a year where they see that, and that was cool.
How many
Yeah.
people did you have at this tournament, you say?
What was it? We had 14, so
Nice.
yeah, that was good.
Yeah, that's a good
Uh,
that's a nice little one-day tournament for sure.
Yeah, and it was great for, between that and these TTS things, it was great for getting a bunch of different uh experiments together for this particular show topic. So I'm really excited.
Yeah. Well, I will say this, and this is my plug for Tabletop Simulator. You can find it on the Big Warcry Discord. You can also link up with the Tabletop Simulator crew on our Discord. That's in the link description below. So if you're interested, come join us on our Discord and talk Warcry and get it linked in there. But I will say this. There's a number of people that were either at our Nova tournament or that I've played with locally or played with elsewhere that were kind of either getting back into Warcry, like they played maybe 1.0 a long time ago, kind of got away from it and getting back into it, or they're new and they're just kind of like, hey, I just want to play more often. I've played some of those guys. I'm like, oh my gosh, you guys have leveled up a lot. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And like to the point where I'm like, I don't think I'm as good as I thought I was anymore because I'm not playing as much as they are. And
Yeah.
it's just, Warcry is a game where time on the stick really matters, right? Like
Mhm.
if you, and you kind of said it with the Madison guys, they're playing every week, multiple games and iron sharpens iron. And, like you play at that constant level and you kind of iterate on a lot of different things. like you learn the ins and outs, especially like movement, positioning, like all that kind of stuff starts to become second nature, and you get much better, much faster. And so, like I was thinking literally like during the thing, I'm like, Nova next year is going to be crazy because like if they're playing Tabletop Simulator for like a year, like there's going to be some beefcakes in that thing, not just good looking ones either, So.
Well, yeah, everybody's getting to try out different lists. We're going to see a whole bunch of new data come out. And 2 points on this. First of all, I'm really glad that Tabletop Simulator kicked off because I was the one like a year ago being like, hey, let's try this. And it was this janky mod that Hood was like holding together with duct tape, doing a great job. You had to set up your own terrain and all this stuff. And then eventually he had the auto terrain loader. So it's kind of like this fun vindication that like finally everybody's acknowledged that TTS works and is a good place to play. And then I had another point, but I think I've forgotten it. So, oh yeah. TTS will also spoil you precisely because of how many cool tools there are. I'm going to need like AR goggles that like will project auras onto a real board because I'm like, oh, how am I going to plan my move? Okay, I'm going to hit all the threat ranges for everybody, and then see where's safe. Which is funny because my first 2 games this league were against OBR, which if you know anything about them, they project everywhere. So when I put the auras on the board, I had like these tiny slivers of safe movement where I wouldn't get double attacked. And I had to like navigate through there. It would have taken me 3 hours on a real table to like measure everything to make sure I was safe. So you learn a lot about like looking at the board and figuring out where your good moves are when you have more tools like that. You just got to translate it to the table.
For sure. Awesome. Cool. Dan, you got any, do we have any other news? Or are we good? Oh, the Nether Maze?
Oh yeah, we are. All we can say is the White Dwarf announced that we will be getting the Nether Maze profiles. So that's the Skaven crew, the Daughters of Cain crew, who unfortunately are going to be attached to Daughters of Cain instead of Cainite Shadowstalkers, even though they are Cainite Shadowstalkers, which is
it's the same
so heartbreaking. But I'm sure they'll be bad anyway, unless they're on this new algorithm where elves aren't quite so expensive.
Well, that would be interesting, right? What if the Shroud Queen from the UW Warband is just really different from the Shroud Queen in the bespoke one?
They just grew up in different courts, okay? Like
right. Yeah, she's like 30 points cheaper, everything else,
That would be pretty cool. And then there's like a corn one that I'm really excited about because it's like kind of an Aztec slaughter priest, which is kind of cool. If those rules are good, I might pick those up. Couple others. I know there's 5 in total that we're going to be getting, which is really cool. There's
Hexbane's Hunters. You can't leave those out because literally everybody's crazy for them. Everybody's been trying to proxy them into everything else.
100%. And you combine those with the with the recent Doggo, that just came out. Like that's a really cool city style, Doggo Hunter list.
Well, because Hexbane's has another dog, right?
Yep. And they got the same kind of vibe going on, which is like like the leather and the straps and the hats and the pistols and all that stuff, so.
Yeah, they feel like an extension of the Wildercorps. They feel like, maybe this is too mean, but they feel like the STLs that didn't quite make it into Wildercorps. They just made Hexbane's Hunters out of them.
Which is crazy to me because like they're great models. I love them. I really do like them, but it's just funny. I agree. They're like the leftovers, right? So yeah, that's pretty good. Awesome. Lots of news, lots of good stuff. If you guys are interested in discussing this, jump into the Discord. We're also very lively chatters in there. With Javi in there, it never is a dull moment. And then you get Robert in the mix, and it gets a little wild.
Then it gets wild.
So, yeah. All right, well, let's talk about Vulkyn Flameseekers. That's what we're here to do our faction focus on today. And here we go. I'm going to pull this up. Warcryer's got all the news for you. Again, we thank you, Warcryer, for your efforts in putting this together. It's funny. I have seen less and less people being like, well, just use Battlescribe. Use Battlescribe all the time.
Not anymore.
Because Warcryer, you're so much better and accurate. Weird. So thank you.
And updated instantly. Black Talon's already up there too.
Exactly. It's like
we just talked about
Battlescribe because Hood used to be the one who does Battlescribe, but he would have because he couldn't update. He could only make the updates, and he couldn't push them through. And it's like because he didn't own the app, and it was just a tough situation. So Warcry all belonging to the same two people, works really well.
100%. And I know. So yeah, exactly. 100%. That's all I'm going to say about that. Anyway, so Vulkyn Flameseekers, which by the way, I really like GW's paint scheme on this. Like I like the dog
They're
that's
gorgeous.
like green and
and the stripes, the black and red stripes on the Mohawks are really cool.
Yeah.
And the way they made like their feet be covered in soot so that they aren't. Their little hobbit feet on regular Fire Slayers look so weird because they're like so bright little feet. But here it's like almost like they've got boots because their feet are covered in soot. So I kind of like that.
Well, that's part of their lore too.
Well,
the soot on the hands and the feet is part of their lore, so it makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this should just be the default sub faction for Fire Slayers, I think, because this color scheme is so much better than the main color scheme that they come with on
it's legit
on all the stuff.
You never could have convinced me to buy Fire Slayers, but I bought a box of the Flameseekers right away.
Yeah,
absolutely. Nice. So let's talk about the leader here. What do we?
You mean the least interesting member of the warband?
I mean, you have to talk about the leader, right?
I mean, he's the leader.
Yeah. So you've got two options with him, right? You've got it's the Vulkyn Runefather with the Mastercrafted Bokaz, or the Droth Vault Great Axe. Which one are you guys taking?
The cheaper one. Just take the points. That's how I would go with it.
In my list, I've taken the more expensive one just because when we get into the abilities, it's the Ignite weapons is just so good. So that extra bit of crit is nice.
But don't you only get 1 damage out of it?
Yeah. Well, if you miss, it takes a miss to a crit, so you get one more. You do get 1 more damage. So ultimately, it comes down to where the points go, because I'd rather have the 5 crit, but these guys are so oddly pointed that 5 points can matter.
Yeah, that's probably true. That's probably true.
Because that's probably what we should start at. These guys, if you build the entire box, you have an extra model. It doesn't fit.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Let's do that at the end, because that is, I think, one of the most important things about this warband. But I think we should go through the fighters first, and then we should talk about that. But that is
one thing I do want to mention. Yeah, sorry. So one thing I do want to mention is that all of them, and this is the first time that I've seen this, right? All of them have a ranged attack, right? And it's all the same profile. It's basically them throwing their axes. And you've seen it to where like there's a lot of like magic heavy war bands, like a Tzeentch warband, for example, where all the heroes will have the same like range magic profile and stuff like that. But I've never seen it where the fighters also have it all. So I think it's kind of interesting. I do think it affects their points though. The fact that all of them have these like, and it's not the greatest. I mean, it's 2 attacks, strength 4, 1/3 damage, like, but it has no minimum range, so you could use it in, like in combat if you need to. But I don't know. It's interesting. I worry that it affected their points too much. In a sense,
it definitely, yeah, they're going from a really solid base, I think, but they are all 5 to 10 points more expensive because of having that ranged attack. Even the poor little doggo has a terrible ranged attack. They can't look at that thing.
I mean, it does all work with the Ignite weapons though. So You're rolling 2 dice, you're going for a miss and a crit, so you get 2 crits. But I've played a couple games with them. Played a couple games against them. The ranged attack comes into play if you're kind of having the standoff. You're just going to do chip damage, And these guys are they hit pretty hard. So if you come into them with some chip damage, you're probably gonna, you might die. You might get taken down.
Well, they've got some abilities we can talk about later that might put you in position. But in general, like I don't want to be move and then shooting with them. I feel like that's a real waste of space because you've only got the 3-inch move. So how are you going to get into position without having done that? Now, for some kill missions, your opponent will do the job for you. I think a lot of people play kill missions like they're drunk and they just go straight at you, or they play it like they're, maybe a little high and a little scared to do anything crazy, and they just kind of stand there not moving. And if your opponent does either of those things, maybe the shooting will help. But otherwise, I think I want to be moving around with them, and that's
well, I mean, it is an 8-inch range, so if somebody's trying to run away, you have a way to plink them off the board.
It is nice in treasure missions because otherwise I do think that these would be pretty terrible in treasure missions. So that part's, I agree with that. That part's really nice if they're specifically trying to hide from you or get away from you.
I do like the idea that any one of your fighters has the opportunity to reach out and touch somebody, that needs to be touched, right? So, I felt the same way about the I'm going to mispronounce his name, but the Chaos Legionnaires chieftain,
the Kyriarch,
yeah,
and his Dark Pact ability, right? Like I actually like it, even though it does damage to yourself. But it's one of those things where it's like if you need to like kill somebody from a distance because you're doing a Reaper mission or you're doing, like you just need them off an objective or something like that. Like it gives you an option to do that. So that is kind of nice, but
well, I'd rather spend dice on it like the Kyriarch does than spending points on it like these fighters do. But don't need to beat the dead horse on that. I tend to like overwhelming numbers and efficiency as opposed to, kind of cute utility. I think it's usually easier to just sort of beat someone off the board with math than it is to outthink them. But
real quick, we can't talk about the Kyriarch without mentioning that Tough Tooting Baby on TTS in the league runs 2 of them in his list.
I went up against that with my Bone Splitters, and like I hated them. Like they were.
I played him too. He was my final match, and it was on that treasure mission. I was afraid to pick up treasure the whole time because the Kyriarch has a 12-inch range on that burn spell.
I know.
So it works. And I think the moral of the story is try anything because it might work.
Well, and he's got we're going way too far afield here, but this leader also has it, so we can tie it back to Fire Slayers. The 21st and 22nd wounds are actually a really big deal here and the Kyriarch has them as well, which is what made me think of it. Because so many fighters in the game do 20 is a multiple of how much damage they deal, if that makes sense. Like if you are on 2s and 4s, if you crit for 5s, right? Like if like 2s and 5s and 2s and 4s both stop at 20 a lot of the time when you're counting that way. And so the 21st wound is actually one of the most important wounds in the game. I would say the 9th wound and the 21st wound on a fighter are probably the 2 most important wounds to have in the game. And these guys have that 21st wound. So that makes them a little bit better, I think, than like the average bespoke leader who's sitting at 20. I think, that 1 wound actually does make a lot of difference as far as how many times you'll get to activate with them.
So it's funny you mentioned that because I was, I've been playing Bone Splitters in the last Tabletop Simulator, and they do, like, a lot of my guys do 3/6 damage with like 3 attacks, right? Or 4 attacks sometimes. And so the 10th is the 10th wound. The 10th wound was the big one. I would leave so many guys on 1 wound, and that was the difference in like 4 of my games. Like, like just leaving 2 guys on 1 wound made the difference because I would have tapped that objective and then I could have moved my guy to go do something else. But they were both on 1 wound, so it took 2 more attacks to kill both of those 1 wound guys, right? And so, I think that is a really good point. Is 21, that like is a really important number. I think 9 is an important number. Yeah, those are really good one. 15 is a good number too. Like I found that a lot of people would get me to like 12 or 13, like in a lot of hits, right? So with the bone splitters. So, but anyway, that's really, really good. This leader's ability, is it good? What does he have?
He doesn't have one. That's why I said he was the least interesting one in the warband.
Oh my gosh, I don't think I realized that.
Yeah, I mean he's got the leader rune mark, but there's no leader ability. So he's just a pretty good fighter.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I don't love
it. I'd almost be more upset to lose one of the chaff than him in some weird ways.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about some of the other fighters that we got here. Which ones do we want to focus on, Dan? The
Let's just go down the list.
Okay.
Drothblood Thane, also known as Dragon Hat. I keep putting my foot in my mouth as far as my aesthetic choices, but I think he's the only member of the warband that doesn't look incredible. But as a fighter, I think he might be the best in the warband. I think he's really, really good. He's in that mid-range place where you never really want to be, but he does a lot for, compared to other fighters at his points value. So I think he's pretty exciting. 5 attacks, 4-2-4. I mean, yes, you don't ever want to walk into counter control. Like you would never want to go up against a dispossessed. Well, now dispossessed has been nerfed for this, but you would never want to walk into, say, Osiarch Bone Reapers with this guy, something like that.
Uh-huh.
But he is quite good for anything that doesn't have toughness 5 chaff. And he has kind of a cool ability. Let's get into this ability because I think that really tells the story of kind of how we use him.
Well, one thing I was going to say is like he surprised me at toughness 5 too. Right, so for 140 points, that's not a bad attack profile. I wasn't expecting the toughness 5 in there,
and
as
20
well.
wounds for toughness.
He's a really efficient Stormcast.
Yeah,
right.
Basically,
yeah, exactly.
That's what he is.
Yeah, so for 140 points, like normally you've got some really crappy mid-range models at 140 points. You know what I mean? Like either their attack profiles suck and they got a lot of wounds, or vice versa, and you're just like, these guys are iffy. I think he's maybe one of the best like 130, 140 point fighters out there, actually. For that. So, all right. So he has the Berserk Rampage, which is pick an enemy fighter within 1 inch of this fighter, roll 6 dice. For each result that matches the value of this ability, allocate a number of damage points to that enemy fighter equal to the value of this ability. For each other result, allocate 1 point to the fighter. So what does that mean, Dan?
It means you can just get in people's face, and this guy blows chaff out of the water. But if you're fighting something that's a little tougher, a little bit harder to crack, you have this triple that's guaranteeing you 6 damage, which is really nice to have. It means that a lot of fighters that he would normally have to really give a wide berth to, you're still not going to recklessly charge him in there, right? That'd be stupid to waste a triple like that. But if they come at you, they have to think twice. You can really put some fear into them because of your ability to go, I'm going to guarantee 6, but most of the time it's going to be more than 6. Most of the time it's going to be, 8, 9, 10. So
I hope people out there are recording the tabletop simulator of this guy for when they roll 6 6s for damage.
All right, so story time.
36 damage.
I've used this guy a lot, and I have done 6 damage almost every time.
Yeah,
it's a really swingy ability because when you're 5 up, you'll roll 6s. When you're 6 up, you'll roll 5s, and you get nothing extra for that. So I was kind of down on it. Like I was originally going to be like, okay, let's run 2 Thanes, get in there, spread out this berserk rampage, use it wherever. And then I kept not getting anything but 6 damage out of it.
That's funny.
So then I think it was on Monday, I played War Games on Toast, Adam, and he was playing this, and it was loot and pillage. It was the last bit of the game, and I was like, the only way that you win this game is if you can kill Vasilak with 1 attack and this ability.
And
this dude had a 6-up triple, and he rolled 3 6s.
Nice. Yeah.
So he did 21 damage.
Oh, that's amazing.
And then proceeded to just like hit and crit, and then barely kill Vasilak, and then I lost.
Yeah.
So it's a very swingy ability because you have to match the value of the dice as opposed to just rolling 6s. So I don't know how to do the math on that because it's not just like any triple works; it's a specific triple.
This is a triple. Yeah, this is a triple that creates Warcry stories. Do you know what I mean?
Right, like that one.
The one that you're like, this one time I was playing, and so it's great that way. I'm gonna compare it though to the Lord Relictor's triple, which is like you roll, the number of dice that you have, and on a 2-up for every dice over 2, you get 1 damage, which you're doing like, if I was rolling 6, I'd be doing like 5 to 6 damage with that, which I thought was decent because it was like, hey, I can like hit somebody 6 inches away and maybe like finish off a chaff or something like that. The fact that you're guaranteed 6 damage on a triple, I don't think is terrible when you really need it.
Well, we already use it, but it's the same as the charge, right? If you have a 6-up the tackle ability, right? That a lot of like bulky units have. It's the same as that, except just always bad, like always at least as good as the best result you could get from that.
Right, exactly.
So I just see this kind of a massive increase in the power of triples because this and Saw It Up with from the Monster Killers, they have crazy spike potential.
Interesting. That's an interesting observation. I don't know that I picked up on that, which is that maybe they're getting, because like the doubles have been very, very good for a long time for a lot of different factions, right? And quads, unless it was Rampage, usually for a long time didn't matter, but triples were very hit and miss, and now that's an interesting observation.
I think they're realizing that you have to plumb other or like mine other design space beyond just like here are the free actions I can give you, because there's only so many types of free actions that you can get, and right now all the free action abilities are the best abilities in the game. And I think that is very slowly changing. If the translations are right on some of these new French warbands, they have some pretty strong abilities that aren't just free actions. So I think that's really cool. I think it's great that they're kind of getting into that design space. And this is one of those where, for most fighters, this ability is just better than a free attack action, right? So
it's a minimum 3 hits on an attack.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So, right. So it's at least as good as that. Like that's not a bad attack.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's really nice.
Talk about
the EV. Oh, just for people at home who don't want to have to do the math, the EV is just whatever your dice value is plus 5. So if you rolled a 4, it's 9. If you rolled a 2, it's 7. So that's your EV for this.
Or if you're me, it's always 6.
Yeah. Javi is rolling bad so that all you guys will roll good. The dice evens out, right, on everything. It's just only evening badly for Javi.
Thank you, Javi.
I was so excited to try this ability out, and then like it just didn't hit like so many times, and then I got slapped by it. It's great.
That was my lead.
I'm not bitter. You're bitter.
When lead for the back got nerfed to be just 1 instead of half the value of the dice, it didn't matter to me because I had never rolled it on a trip 3s or 4s or 5s or 6s before. Nice. Anyway. All right, let's get into that Droth Master, who I also think is really good.
Yeah, so interestingly, he's got a 3-inch, ranged melee attack. 3 attacks, strength 4, 2/4 damage. He's 125, and so yeah. Tell me why you like him, Dan.
Well, I just think his ability is the bee's knees, and I think in general, 3-inch range attacks are really useful. It can kind of shock people how far that is on the board. That's a really
It's a 6-inch
wide.
bubble.
Yeah.
Well, it's a 7-inch bubble because you got to take the base into account.
The base
the base is real chunky.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And then 3-4-2-4 is one of those where like you never take a fighter because it has 3-4-2-4, but then when you just walk up to a fighter, just dismissing that ability, like, oh, I won't take any damage from this guy, it does do some damage, and at a 3-inch bubble, that's good. But the real reason you're taking him is for this ability. Like it's mostly the body isn't it isn't a tax, and then you get to do Creed of Flame. I can't talk today. Pick a friendly fighter that is not within 6 inches of this fighter. That fighter makes 2 bonus move actions or 1 bonus attack action. If that friendly fighter has the Beast Rune mark, which this is order, so that's worthless, that fighter makes 2 bonus move actions, then a bonus attack action. So you can ignore that last sentence, but the middle sentence there is really, really good.
Now you're just dunking on our little magma dog.
Yeah, you're right. There was a little bit too much of the opinion page there, and not enough of the who, what, where, when, why, right? But Javi, have you been playing a lot of Drothmaster?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's the most interesting member of the warband, and if it wasn't the weird ally rules that we have, he would be the leader. Because he's the one that's whipping people around the board. He can whip the leader around the board. That doesn't make any sense. But you can't have him be the leader because then he would just be allied into any other warband.
Yeah, no kidding.
I kept saying when I saw this guy, I'm like, if we had him as a leader in Chaos, it would be over. Chaos would win everything because he would just be slinging these big angry Myrmidons all over the board. So he's really interesting. I think he's got a really solid attack profile. I like 3-inch range. With 4 strength, it's really nice because you're not also getting super countered because a lot of the 3-inch range stuff is 3 strength as well. So he's interesting because of sequencing, right? So you're launching another fighter that's on the other side of the board, 2 move actions, and then it's sitting there. So it's a weird kind of setup because you don't immediately get to attack unless you're sending the dog there. So I've been trying to figure out the best way to use them. Really, you want them on the board round 1, but you have to be careful who you deploy him with because he can't use it on anybody near him. So
he can't be within 6 inches. Yeah.
Well,
right. So
you can move twice in a straight line and then use it on someone in his deployment group, but that's not ideal.
Right. So it becomes a sequencing thing where it's not immediately apparent how to use him optimally. You gotta kind of think it out and probably wait out some activations. You can move another model and then fling it two more moves later when you activate him.
I was gonna say, if you put him in a round 1 type of thing, you could probably catch some people unaware. Like, especially if you're like in one of those weird dagger ones that are like 8 inches from the center of the board across from each other, and they're maybe there's a treasure in the middle. They kind of move closer to the treasure, thinking like, oh, you're never gonna get there. So they do a double move. You could send your dude double move and then move him again and get him engaged for beginning round 2. And so you're getting swung against, right? Like right away. But he's right in the thicket of it, like for round 2. So that's an ideal, to me, that's an ideal round 1 play with him.
Right. And I like putting +1 move on the Thane. So now you're launching a 4 move Angry Dwarf at them instead of just a 3 move. And then nobody really wants a Thane in their face. So I like him. I think he's cool. I wish the dog was a little better so that you could really want to use that double move and attack, but
Better
the
than
dog
the
isn't bad.
Yeah.
I mean that's a lot of value. I mean, it's like a heat-seeking missile dog. Just
So
right across the board.
let's talk about our magma dog. I mean, it's a dog you love to hate, but you still love him because he's your puppy. So
There's no hate here. He's great. He's great. Competitively viable, I don't know, but he's great.
he's cute.
80. He should be 85 points, in my opinion.
Well, I have some tinfoil hatting to talk to you about later after we finish all of the fighters.
Okay. All right.
As he is, just like I want him to do something else also. Like he's only got 10 wounds for 110 points. That's usually on my oh no no's list. Anything over over 90 with only 10 wounds is kind of an oh no no. He does have that 4 attacks, 4 strength, and 2s and 3s. I mean, his attack profile is fine. It's just he's gonna die so quick, and you spend so many points on him. Oof. Yeah. I'm not a buyer on the dog. At a
Do
different
you
point
like his?
cost, I would
Do you like
be.
his ability? It's like a mini flamer, and Javi knows about flamers here.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I got excited about these guys in the first place. I was like, you give me a little mini flame hurler dog. Who's been tapping into my dreams?
But it's so much worse. It's unplayable,
so much
right?
worse.
Because
no, I mean, I think it's just fun. I don't think I don't think I'm ever going to take him to a tournament, but he's just so cool. He's just burping flame at guys and burning them up. It just makes me laugh. But I mean, the way I've envisioned using him is getting him up on elevation and firing off 8-inch range shots at things. And then he's ready to be launched across the board to capture an objective or just drag somebody down or something. He has uses. He's just way too expensive for what he does. But you can still make him useful and have fun with him, especially like in a whole bunch of different lists. But he's just not the best. Like the scale breakers are way better. The Thane's way better.
I just don't think that he can be used the way that people want to use him, right? Like you're like, I want this flame dog to go flame up a whole bunch of people. Like you just want him to get in the mix of it, and you can't use him that way, just as you kind of described. So it's counterintuitive in that sense, right? Because like this is where the lore and the fluff sort of get in the way of how he's written, So. Yeah.
Well, I mean, one of my favorite things to do with Horns of Hashut flame hurlers was to flame hurl a deployment, right?
Yeah.
Round 2, just torch a deployment. With you can get a little bit of that, and I think chip damage is something I'm coming around to. I just don't want to pay 110 points for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I pay 50 for my chip damage.
Exactly.
Right? Like,
is that your KO?
I do.
KO guys?
Yeah. KO, Plague Bearers. Like, I'm not trying to pay anything more than 50 points for my little chip. I mean, if I'm trying to win, obviously there's such a big, great sandbox to Warcry, but it does, the existence of really broken 50-point chaff just makes it, when you look at a profile like 1624 on a 110-point model, you're just like, ooh, okay, let's Ooh.
Yeah. So we have.
I don't want to be too down on him because we have some other cool fighters. Let's get into this.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we said, he's the doggo you love to hate, but he's still your doggo. So
If I bring him, I tell everybody I'll John Wick him if they kill him.
Yeah.
So
that's great.
That's awesome. All right, so we've got basically our chaff models at 95 points each. It's a scale breaker with the fire steel split axe and the scale breaker with the bokaz. How you guys feeling about these two?
I think they're the best fighters in the warband.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Because they're 95 points.
Yeah.
And you want to bring 4 of them, but they do a scary amount of damage with ignite weapons. right? If you look up at ignite weapons, right, that one says count
now's the time
one
to talk
miss.
about it, right?
Yeah, it's a double. Count one miss from the next attack action made by the spider of this activation as a critical hit instead.
Yeah.
So let's just say you roll a miss, a hit, and a crit, which happens happens pretty often. That's 12 damage with
that's a
double, and then he still has another attack.
Yeah.
You're deleting, a mid-range model with a double. It's way better than onslaught. It's and then you want to be real cheeky, put crit damage on it for 10 points.
And
now they're hitting 2-6.
Yeah. and especially like you take this guy up again. I mean, like the fire steel split axe is got 3 attacks for strength 5, right? But like you put him up against a toughness 6 or even a toughness 5 fighter like a stormcast. I mean, the chances are that you're gonna miss at least one of those, and all of a sudden, like 4 damage on him or 5 damage depending on your guy, right? Like that's not for nothing, because that's an 8-point swing right there. You know what I mean? Well, I don't know. It's a 4-point swing. You're not going negative damage, but instead of a miss, it's a crit. So like that's a significant change.
Right. The worst case scenario is that you do 6 damage because you do 3 hits.
Right.
So they bite really hard. So if you're moving in and this whole warband just hits really hard if you get near them and you don't kill them. So they're very punishing when you get close to them. So what I've been doing is just trying to keep them as like a death ball. So I'll try to move them around together. So if you move in, you're gonna face like 2 or 3 of them, and then one or 2 of them is gonna ignite weapons, and then the Drothmaster can whip them for another attack.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I'd rather use an ignite weapons with a double than use a triple to whip them.
Yeah.
For the extra attack.
Do you like the Bocaz who has less strength but more crit damage just because of that?
Yeah, I try to take. I want one Bocaz in each deployment group, and then I'll take one split axe just to deal with higher toughness stuff. But I think the 2/5 is really, it's just such a huge swing to go from a miss to a crit.
Yeah.
And and even if not, they're still doing good damage.
Yeah. I think I'm definitely more of a buyer on the split axe myself. The opportunity cost is only 1 damage plus it's a slightly better profile when you're not spending dice on them, but getting that extra 1 day, we were just talking about how many times Justin leaves somebody on 1 health, and so
seriously.
The 1 damage is not nothing.
But you're hitting on 3s a lot with this.
Yeah. So a lot of the time, in certain situations, you're gonna get better than that 1 damage because you rolled on the thing that you rolled a 3 and you hit instead. But then again, sometimes your regular crits. Just in general, I think the naked profile without flaming weapons is just a tiny bit better on the axe. And I mean, Javi's the one who's been playing it, but like when I read it, I'm just so excited to be using all of my dice to try to get the triples that are on the 2 specialists, because those triples are so busted. And when I look at this warband, what I want to do is take that Drothmaster and start whipping Stormcast Paladins around the board, because to me, like, that's just a wild amount of power. Like what you can do to a Decimator Prime, especially because that's the one where if you've taken a little bit of damage on one of your allies, the Decimator Prime can get a free move off a double. And so, that's an absurd amount of utility. And then you can whip it around the board with the Drothmaster, and that thing is
3 bonus moves.
Powerful. Yeah, so it's like you're just getting all kinds of bonus moves onto a Stormcast Paladin leader. And those things are incredible, except for when they just like come on the board round 2 and don't do anything, right? Because that happens when you take Stormcast Paladins as an ally. That happens, right? And you lose so many of the games where that happens, and if you don't have something to do with them, and this warband can do it. God. And he's 20 wounds for 125 points, 20 wounds on the Drothmaster. It's like, because the opponent wants to kill the support wizard, right? But this support wizard is, T4 20 wounds and not that expensive. So I think that
And there's
has
going to be a scale breaker next to him that if you don't kill him, the scale breaker is going to come in and crack you.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of options to go around there. Like I said, the only thing that becomes weird is that you're flinging a model that then has to sit there for an activation.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Which is why I
So,
love those paladins. Because
yeah, they'll
you're not
survive.
killing
Yeah.
them. You're not killing them. They're on toughness 6. They've got 25 wounds. Yeah.
All right. So so we talked about Ignite Weapon. The other ability that is universal with this group is the Blazing Impetus, which I can use it only after making 2 move actions the same activation. They get to make a bonus move action or bonus disengage action. I can see this as very situational, right? Like you just need to get somewhere for a thing. I do like the fact that they added the disengage there though. So you could literally yeet yourself in there if somebody's sitting on an objective, but then disengage and cap that objective, right? Like I think it's kind of nice. It's not I don't think it's going to be as widely used as Ignite Weapons, obviously, right? But it does.
It's a great first round move. It's a great final round move.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
100% for Dumble. The last ability that I think we can talk about the reaction here in a minute, but the quad. I'm curious now that like Rampage has been nerfed. This is always the question I have now. Now that Rampage has been nerfed, is this quad good? Right. This is the aspect of the scales. Pick an visible enemy fighter within 3 inches of this fighter. Roll 6 dice for each roll of a 2-up. Allocate a number of damage points to that fighter equal to half of this ability running up. So you're either going to have a 1, 2, or 3 that you allocate for each dice, right? 6. So, for 2-up, you're looking at like minimum 5 damage ish, right? On average. Not minimum, but average of 5 damage on a 1, and so 10 on a 2 and 15 on a 3.
So in that same game where Adam deleted Vasilak with the triple, he also mostly deleted Slake Slash with the quad. So again, stuff that I didn't get to play with that he was just slapping me around with. So the quad is powerful. The triple has a lot of swing potential. But I think he did. I think he did it with like 5 ups. So I think he did like 15 damage to Slake Slash on the quad.
Yeah.
And remember, Justin, the Rampage change is a buff for Fire Slayers. It's not a nerf.
It is.
Right.
Yeah, that is a very good point, Dan. Absolutely. Right, because it's not a bonus move, right? It's like, and so if you have a 5 on your dice, I mean that's a bonus move, almost 2 bonus moves essentially for them, right? With a with a 5 movement. So that does help. The question though is, do you think that you could, like, if you had somebody within 3 inches of you, like, does that 5 really matter in terms of, you know what I mean? Like, it gives you the bonus move to get in there and then attack 3 times, or you could just do 50, like 12 to 15 damage and then get in and attack once, right? So
if you have a high
15
quad, I
damage
think
is a lot. 15
if you have a high quad and don't need to move, you're using this ability.
Right.
Yeah. The other time I think you use it is if your leader and your dragon hat are both dead, then the 3 attacks is not going to be as good as the quad, right? Because they're the 2 fighters who 3 attacks from them is better than 1 attack plus this. But if they're dead, which is going to happen a lot late in the game because they're the scariest fighters, right? The leader and the dragon hat, right? Your opponent's going to be trying to kill them. So if they're dead, then yeah, you'll probably use this. I mean, in general, I think teams that have a really good way to use a full house are just generally a good place to be, and you can often ignore the faction quad in favor of having a full house. And this team is really good with a full house, right? Because you can do one of the 2 specialist abilities and you can do Ignite Weapon. So if I roll a triple, I'm it's a tough decision. I'm going to go with the full house, uh, but this quad doesn't suck. I mean, there's definitely times
Right.
when you'll use it.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. All right, so we should mention the reaction, and this will kind of round us out. This is you can use it after you're targeted, but before the hit rolls are made. You count up to 2 critical hits from that attack action as hits instead. I think this is kind of situational. This is like
It's
when a
so
gut lord is coming after
situational.
you. This is like,
Oh,
the
really?
gut lord or a Myrmidon, right? Like is attacking you, and you're like, I really don't need to die. I really can't die here, So
I'll tell you what. Oh, go ahead, Dan.
Oh no, I want to. You've been playing with it. I'm curious how it's been going for you.
I'm going to sound like a broken record, though. Like, every time I've used it, it hasn't done anything. But then it saved Adam in that game. So,
Adam!
right. So what it is, this is a reaction you use when you have a lot of wounds left. You use it early because reducing 2 crits to hits when you're almost dead anyway probably isn't going to save you.
Right.
So if a big angry dude moves in and you're full wounds, you might want to use the reaction then because that might save you. But if you're low wounds, just counter. It's not going to save you.
Right.
I would say so. This is the same as the Iron Golem's reaction.
Yep.
And this reaction is part of why Iron Golems are good. Because
there's
now
one
they
or
have
2?
What?
Is there like reduce 1 critical hit or 2?
I don't know if they do 1 or 2. We can look that up. I can look that up while I'm talking. But essentially, now it is better for Iron
It's the
Golems.
same reaction.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, it is the same. Good. So it is a little better for Iron Golems because they've got cheaper guys. They've got those 75 point toughness 5 guys, right? So Iron Golems can kind of troll you a little bit where it's like you can only hurt me with crits because you can never get a hit, and your crits are only regular hits, so good luck. This warband can't do that, but I still think it's a good reaction. Especially if my conspiracy tinfoil hat things work out. They can't sell a box that is not a valid warband. Like they can't be doing that. So the chance, this is gonna get FAQ'd. This warband is gonna get FAQ'd. Now I don't know what is gonna come down 20 points. But if it's the scale breakers, then this reaction gets really good, right? If those scale breakers go to 90 points, you have legitimate reason to run a bunch of them, right? So if that happens, then I think this reaction is great because then it's like you have all these unkillable scale breakers. And what's amazing, Javi's already alluded to this, you can react, make it so they don't do any damage to you, and then ignite weapons so that most of your offense is on just 1 attack anyway. Right? Like it's not like onslaught. When your chaff really wants to be using onslaught, which these guys actually don't use onslaught all that badly either. They're actually kind of used for onslaught.
I mean, you go to 4-4-2-5 on the Bokas. That's not bad.
Yeah. Right.
But when your chaff, it's like Seraphon, right? Like when your damage is on just 1 attack, you can react with impunity essentially because it's not really affecting your offense all that much. And so if that happens, if the scale breakers go down to 90 points, which they might, I mean, who knows which one? I don't know which fighter is going to go down, but if they go down by 90 points, then I think this reaction becomes very spicy, and all of a sudden, running lists with 6 of these scale breakers actually becomes something you might want to do.
Well, I'll tell you what, since James Workshop is listening to our podcast, thank you again. Welcome to the show. They're going to hear how bad the Kindle Droth is, and it's going to go down to 90 points.
It's not bad. He's cute. Don't say bad things about the dog.
If you brought the Kindle Droth down to 90 points, and now that's the chaff model, I might run 2 of them.
No. My conspiracy theory is that Games Workshop wants you to run these guys at 920 points and take 2 wild dice blessings.
There you go.
That's my, because I did that, and that was my best game with them. Was just having
That's scary.
an endless. I took priority. I did whatever I want. My wild dice. I had all the ignite weapons I could handle, and triples every. It was just great. So
yeah, you know the idea that they're not going to have 1,000-point warbands out of the box because blessings are out there isn't a terrible conspiracy there. I think it liberates them to design war bands and not have to constrain them. Because, like, for example, you look at a Corvus Cabal that's supposed to be 1,000 points out of the box, and either you need to add more models and drop those points, or you need to buff up their profiles to what is kind of ridiculous profiles for little elves that think that they're birds, right? So
I think you guys
or
are too
humans.
online. I'm sorry. Nobody knows that blessings exist. Like
Well, no, so
90%
I
hear me
know.
of
out.
Warcraft
It's
So
players don't know they
hear me
exist.
out. I
it
agree
just
with
works
you,
out
Dan.
that way.
No, Dan, I totally agree with you. I think that blessings is going to get like integrated into the Warcry 3.0. And
Yeah, I agree with
so
that. Mhm.
and so what's going to happen is they're going to start putting out these war bands that might be slightly under or even slightly over 1,000 points, and just be like, you guys can now do what you want with him in 3.0 because you have blessings to like play with the numbers, and now we're not having to like be beholden to design a perfect 1,000-point army in the box.
Yeah, I
So
think that's a great point. Absolutely, Justin. But I think it's for 3.0, like once it's in
sure,
the core book. Yeah,
yes,
but
yeah,
absolutely it empowers them to get way lazier if they want. Or
or more creative, right? Like,
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
that's the way I. James, don't listen to him.
We won't let Dan say bad things about you anymore.
Oh man. Oh,
So yeah,
So, but yeah, overall, I really like these guys. They're a lot of fun. There's a little bit of a puzzle to them to get the movement right on them. But they hit really hard. They just do a lot of damage. So, and they're pretty survivable.
yeah,
yeah.
So,
yeah. I'm
except for the
That's the
dog.
excited.
thing about slow warbands.
Yeah. I'm excited because they fit the flavor profile that we kind of reviewed with our previous, Fire Slayers, and like they're still within that same kind of lore and fluff vein, but
Yeah.
they're unique enough that like they seem like a lot of fun to play. So I'm excited to try them out for sure. So awesome. Well, I'm glad, Javi, that you're on the show to talk to us about this because, like I said, I hadn't played him yet, and I'm glad that you have and gave us that experience. So if you guys are interested, go check them out. You can check out all their profile stats again on Warcrier, and again, if you got questions, hit us up in the in the Discord chat. I'm sure Javi will be happy to answer any of your questions. So I'm directing them to you, Javi, as our FAQ guy for these guys.
Let's do it. I
So
did send in an email, a sternly worded email about the pointing on these guys to GW. So we'll see what they do.
they're gonna be like, blessings, do it. So awesome. All right, so let's get to our main topic. Dan, one thing that you wanted to talk about is kind of mission scoring, right? Like, this is a big thing in my opinion right now, especially as more people get to doing more tournament organizing, and it's like we're looking at the TTS online and things like that. GW has given us some missions to play with, and it's interesting. Even in 1.0, you could go through those mission scoring cards, and you could be like, "This is a great mission. This one's terrible. This is a great mission. This one's terrible." And like you just kind of knew, like as you played, like
Mhm.
based on the scoring of these victory points, like what was good, what was bad. And similar to, in my opinion, Age of Sigmar, not all missions are good for tournaments, right? Like you could play a mission that is an epic game between you and your friend, but it would be terrible for a tournament just because maybe it's imbalanced, it's not it's a little too asymmetric, right? Like you kind of need sort of that balance there. And I think that you need good ways to score these missions that sometimes aren't as evident in the little mission cards that you get in your box sets type of thing. So mission scoring, like what do we mean by this, right? Like you've seen a lot of times, like, okay, this is, your primary score, your secondary score, and your tournament quest. So, Dan, do you want to like break those down for us?
Yeah, so if we're talking about primary scoring, not every mission needs a primary score and secondary score. By that I mean there are missions where there is a main way that you are getting points in this mission, and then that would be your primary scoring. And then there is a second way to get points in the mission. And I think a lot of people are finding that missions that have these two different things to think about are just much more replayable. And, the second time you play it, the third, fourth time you play it are just much more fun than some of the missions where there's only one thing that you kind of care about. And so that can just be a way to add texture to a mission. Now, not every scenario needs a secondary score. In fact, some of them would be kind of inappropriate to have one. But it can just be a really nice tool to sort of look at when you're kind of looking through missions as just like a quick sort of thing to think about. This one, Brutal Cull, is actually one example of a mission that doesn't have a secondary scoring system and actually doesn't have points,
Right.
which I think is a great example of why you don't always necessarily need primary or secondary scoring. Um, because this one is from the new boxed set with Gorger Maw Pack versus the Dog Friends, um, where a battle group becomes broken if half of the fighters in it are taken down, ends after 4 battle rounds, and the player with the fewest broken battle groups wins. This is just I added a deployment that I designed myself to it, but this is essentially right out of the GW sort of box. Um,
Mhm.
and I think it's a really brilliant mission that doesn't need primary and secondary scoring, right? Because
Right.
you are focusing on two different things, whether you know it or not. You are focusing on fighters that can kill guys on the other team, and you are focusing on protecting a wide array of fighters because
Mhm.
you essentially, the more fighters you have in your warband, the harder it is to break it, except the easier it is to kill each individual fighter. So then you sort of run around with your various fighters if you've got a bunch, or you use one as a bully piece if you've only got one, right? And you just hope to kill them before they bring down the big guys. So um, this is just like a really interesting way to force players to think about two things, you know, kind of without telling them that they are thinking
Yeah.
about two things, which I think is really genius. And great job to Games Workshop for coming up with this. I hadn't thought of anything like this at all.
Right.
So that's awesome.
Now, I have a question,
Um,
Dan. Did you lift the
mhm.
wording out of this like verbatim, pretty much?
Yes, I took it straight from the mission from Hunters and Hunted, or whatever
Yeah.
it's called, the
So
Gorgers versus the Wilder Corpse.
so here's the interesting thing to me. This is the first time, in my opinion, that they have talked about a major win and major loss in the
Oh,
victory condition
sorry.
here. Was
Sorry.
that
No,
you?
I
Did you put
added
that in
that
there?
part. I added that
Okay.
part,
All
but
right.
the first two
Okay.
paragraphs are verbatim. Yeah, the
Okay.
first two
All right.
paragraphs
Cool.
are verbatim. Yeah, yeah.
All right. So so
Um,
I was like, wow, this is the first time I've seen them do that. And but yeah, okay. I mean, that makes more sense to me.
and
But
I added
I
that last paragraph because of conversations with you, because you have talked so many times about how unsatisfying it is,
yes.
the current way they do major and minor losses. So yeah, sorry, I interrupted you. I think you were going to make a point about that though.
No, I was just gonna say I love it. Like I think just for what exactly you said, right? Which is, like here it is. Like you've got this really easy way to tell if you've got a major or a minor. Like you don't have to do all this complicated math. You don't
Right.
have to do these okay, well if I move my guy here, but I don't move my guy there, do I get a secondary? But I don't get a secondary, and like the problem with secondaries, in my opinion, is sometimes they're too overthought. Do you know what I mean? Like sometimes to get the secondary, it's almost more complicated than getting the primary, and it requires so much more like strategic aspect of it that you lose the sense of the mission because you're thinking about like, how do I get the secondary, when it should be just that. It is a secondary aspect of the mission. And like, this is a great example of a quest where I don't need to think about it that much, other than like, hey, I need to break more than I get broken, right? Like that is, that's what it comes down to. So,
And let's move to a mission that has a really clean secondary, that's
yeah,
really easy to figure out. So Might Makes Right is one. It came from Red Harvest,
yep,
which was a box set from first edition with lots of really cool terrain. I freaking love the Red Harvest terrain. I think
I
it's
love
so
it.
awesome.
It's so good.
But yeah, Might Makes Right is great because it's like, here's the main way you score. You win objectives. Great. Here's the second way you score. You kill fighters who are on the same objective as you. You like bully them off the objective and you kill them with melee stuff. Really easy. The secondary objective follows from the primary objective, which I think is really brilliant. This one is lifted verbatim from Games Workshop. This is before I had put majors and minors. I think now when I put this in tournaments, I do like, if you won by 4 or more, it's a major. If you won by 3 or less, it's a minor.
Yeah.
But yeah, this one's great, and it also leverages something that they do in the matched play cards, but they never do in the like in the, here are our 6 scenarios kind of thing in the core book
Yeah.
or in the Rumble Pack, where they let you place your own objectives, which I think is really great for spiky players. It can do a bit of a feel bad for new players, I think. But I think it's really fun and it adds a ton of replayability. I won a casual game on this one recently where I put my objectives exactly 6 inches or 6.1 inches away from each other. I put one 6.1 from the center and I put another 6.1 from the center and the other one. I made an equilateral triangle. And then I put all my fighters on the spaces where they could contest both of them. Or I did 6.5 inches. And I think the person who I was playing against, they weren't mad, but I think in round 2 they were like, all right, like, I'm gonna lose because I didn't know that you, or I didn't think that you could do that. Or,
Yeah.
it's like, and
Yeah.
it felt unsatisfying to them, I think, because it was like, yeah, it was just silly. Like, because the point of this, unless terrain gives you like an incredibly defensible point, the point is to create 2 dueling equilateral triangles, and whoever invades the other person's triangle wins,
Yeah.
which is a really fun game. I think it's really awesome. But
Right.
but yeah, you have to like play it once against someone who knows that
Yeah. It's
in order
true.
to understand it. But otherwise, I think this mission is perfect, and I think it's really good.
It's
So
my favorite one of the new missions we've tried in League and all of that, because it's great balance of horde versus elites, and
yeah.
it's basically everything that was bad about the Rumble Pack. This fixes.
Yeah. I agree. Now, Javi, when you go into a tournament and you see, like a mission like this where it's talking about primaries and secondaries and stuff like that, how do you break that down as you prepare like for that tournament? So this is assuming too that you get that tournament pack like a month or a month and a half before, so that you can mess around with your friends and try things out. But how do you break down how you approach, scoring when you go in there?
Well, you want enough to cover the objectives and then be able to kill on them. So what I like is that this opens up the possibility of really running an elite warband into an objective mission. When I played Horns of Hashut at ACO, I did that because it was the perfect setup for them. But I wouldn't necessarily take them. I mean, they might work really well on here, but I'd be much more excited to take something that's a little bit killier because I want to score those points on the objectives. So the way I really approach the tournament prep is, what are my goals and what do I want to play? First tournament with you guys, I wanted to play Slanesh, so I tried to make Slanesh work for a mostly objective based thing, and it worked out pretty well, but also it was a little rough. But when I see this one, I just kind of like the fact that I can bring anything I want and tune it a little bit, as opposed to being kind of pushed to only one play method or play style being optimal, right? And Rumble Pack, if you're not running a swarm, you're really having a bad time. But that's not the case here.
Yeah. So when you're looking at there's usually, I don't know, 4 or 5 missions that are sometimes in these things, right? Do you look at the primaries first and then the secondaries? Do you worry about covering down on the primary first just to at least get the win? Versus like knowing that you're going to get like the major win if you cover the secondaries?
Well, what I'm looking at is how am I going to score the most points? Right? Like how do I want to score my points? How am I going to do that best? What was the other one? So the one we've been playing a lot lately is like Power Struggle. With the middle, if you hold the middle, you get 3 points.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, if I want to do well on that mission, I want models that can cover the middle and an objective and sit there.
Yeah.
And then you need to move me off of those points because I'm scoring points as long as I'm sitting here.
One thing I like about that combo, because I've played that combo too, is how the center becomes less and less important over time, but it starts as like really, really important. And so, sometimes you can kind of outthink your opponent if you know when it's going to become not important anymore. Because Power Struggle, eventually, the center always stays worth 3 points. And so in round 4, you actually don't care about the center. You want to be covering your home objectives, which is really, really cool.
Yeah, I mean, and that's all part of the long-term strategy. It's like eventually you're right. That center is just not as important anymore, and you're gonna move from the middle out to the edges and make your opponent chase you.
And it's super fun because any mission, one good like formula for a mission is where you keep moving over the course of the mission. You keep caring about what you're going to do over the course of the mission, which I think is a good formula in general. I was wondering, Justin, if you could move to the next one.
Yep.
It should be the one with 6 objectives.
Is it the Graveyard of Heroes?
Yeah, that's the one.
Yep, I just was pulling it up.
And this is one that is a Rumble Pack combination. That's, I think, one of the good ones from Rumble Pack.
I haven't seen this one before.
From Rumble Pack.
This is the Supremacy one, right?
Yeah, so it's Supremacy. Yeah. I've shuffled the map around a little bit to just do a slightly different flavor of map. Just because, variety is fun. That's the only reason, really. But the scoring is from Rumble Pack. And then I just, instead of doing only leaders, I did all soup. So leader, hero, thrall, ally, and it's supposed to say monster. I learned. So now when I run it, it says monster, but in this printout, it doesn't. But this is one where the secondary objective is really more of a tiebreaker, right? Yeah. It's like you really need, like, you're scoring the most points off the primary, but if you can reach out and touch their leader, if you can reach out and touch their allies, you can really shock them, and you can, like, especially if you sort of do it early, you can get a lot of points that way. But it's kind of it's harder to think about, but it's still fun. I don't think it's quite as like pristine and clean as Might Makes Right is, but this I've found is a really, really fun mission.
Go ahead, Javi.
Well, I was gonna say the interesting thing is that we found out in this previous league, the October league, was some of these missions are really interesting because there's a big discrepancy in points you can score, depending on warband composition. Like there were some of them where it's like, well, one warband can score at most, let's just say 12 points, but the other warband, because of the composition, can score like 20 points.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So if you're, let's put it this way: if I'm playing against Peter's list, Peter Merchant Cabbage, who always runs like
Gives up a lot of
so
points.
many UWs and Underworld and stuff, and he's just basically the soupiest thing in the world. There's like 30 points on the board.
Yeah,
Yeah.
every kill you get scores points. Yeah.
Meanwhile, if you're playing a one box bespoke, there's a lot fewer points.
Right.
And I like including missions like that, even though some players do get mad about them, because you force your players to read the damn pack, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
design for the pack. And
Yep.
if they took a really strong net list that wasn't designed for the pack, they can get punished that way. And I
Right.
think this is one way. There are lots of other ways to do it, but this is one way through an objective mission to kind of punish a net lister who didn't think about what their plan was. Now you could still, I think Peter is actually very good at avoiding confrontation in game if he needs to, right? Because he's got all those netters, things like that. But you need to, you can't just. I mean, I see people. One thing that's really in vogue in the US meta is like these Cruel Boys lists that are like
Yeah.
super soupy, but they've only got one netter. And I think generally they're pretty bad. But they are really popular right now, and I think people are, going
Thanks,
500
Robert.
with them, not doing bad. Yeah, well, Frothgorn is different than like general KBZ soup,
Yeah.
Frothgorn
Yeah.
is Frothgorn. That I don't even count that as Cruel Boys. But generally, I mean, if you're playing a Cruel Boys soup list with a bunch of Underworlds models and a hero and a thrall ally, and like you're giving up a ton of points, and you don't have a way to stop them attacking you, you could be in trouble here. Yeah, but that's just kind of a thing that tests whether you read the pack or not.
So, I'm going to comment specifically on this Graveyard of Heroes, which I really, really do like. One, Supremacy is actually one of my favorite missions. I really like the hold 2, hold 3, hold more scoring system. I like that when I played 40K 9th edition when it first came out, and I liked it when they translated it into Age of Sigmar when the third edition came out, and I liked that it found its way into Warcry. I've always loved hold 2, hold 3, hold more. I think it's a really easy, basic way to understand how scoring works, for like a lot of objective missions. So that's great. The criticism that I got when I had originally included Supremacy, again, which was one of my favorite missions, into the Nova Pack, was that it had the potential, like if you had a Horde army, to just vastly swing the score of that game, and it, like, a lot of people really didn't like that, right? So I opted for I think it was Power Struggle after that or something like that. Anyway, but I do think that your secondary here is what makes the difference, Dan, because you can, in the process of taking over another one, like in theory, you should be holding both of you should be holding 3 in round 2, in theory, right? And then it gets wild from there, from when you're trying to like move off and go cap some other objectives and fight in the process. And so, by doing this, you have the opportunity to either gain back some score or increase your lead, depending on where you're sitting with your objectives. And I think that that's what a good secondary does, right? It takes whatever the theme of the primary is and enhances it. You know what I mean? Like it builds into that as well. And again, like, you don't have to think that hard about what the secondary is. You don't have to like do something that is counter to what the mission is. So let me give you an example of a bad secondary, in my opinion. You're playing Reaper, but your secondary is get your model to the highest point on the terrain.
Yeah.
And you're like, that's
Agreed.
a bad
100%
secondary.
agree.
That's a terrible secondary, because like you need to like get your models fighting each other, and you're telling, like, to get the secondary, you're telling it to run away, and somebody will be like, oh, well, it's fun because then you can get your models moving. It's not fun. Like, it's counter to what the mission's trying to do. The good secondaries, like, enhance what the primary is trying to do. So
And so one thing you're kind of alluding to now is tournament quests, which
yeah,
is sort of an extra thing on top of secondaries, where a secondary is um, should be, I think, like self-contained within the mission, right? And
yeah,
so the mission is the total points you got between the primary and the secondary, or just the primary if that's whatever the win condition is.
yeah.
The other way to do
Is this
it,
what you wanted, Dan? By the way.
yeah, so tournament quests, if you flip to page something of your core book, I don't have the
Yeah.
page in front of me, but tournament quests are the 6 um, little quests that everybody forgets every
Everybody,
single game. I, I have
even if it's
won a
right there in the rules, pick your quest
yeah,
now. Like everybody will forget it.
I have won a tournament forgetting my quests 4 times.
Yeah.
um, and so they're just not working. And so they're really cool as like little tiebreakers in theory, right? But because everyone forgets them, they're essentially worthless. Like it's not a test of skill if your tiebreaker is did you remember or not. So I was thinking we should have things that are the same every game. So
Uh-huh.
it's just like you can check at the end, did I do this? Now the good players are going to play in a way that improves their chances of getting them. But um, other players, will do other things. And one thing that I did in the last tournament I ran, because again, we had a conversation on this podcast about how unsatisfying tournament quests were.
Yeah.
I wanted to do something different, and I wanted to do something really silly sounding because, just to remind people to have fun out there.
Yeah.
So I painted a bunch of animal models, like a bunch of pets, because I've just been like getting them because every Warcry warband has a pet, right? So I just put a bunch of pets out there on all the boards, and I had like a little pig, I had a dune claw, the crab, I had like a little Idenith fish, I had, various pets, and I just put them in the center and said that people can fight over the golden goose, but like it's going to be extremely minimal how much it affects the actual game. So you can pick it up, but it doesn't reduce your movement, and beasts and monsters can get it, so anybody can get it. uh you If you target someone with a melee attack action, you take the goose from them, regardless of whether you hit or miss. I had people missing all of their attacks and being like, well, the reason he missed is because he was focused on the goose. So,
Yeah.
That'll put a smile on your face.
yeah. And so it kind of just becomes this hot potato thing. And so it was like, if you touched the goose at all, you got a point. But if you ended with the goose, you got 2 points. And then I added another thing for leaders, just to have something that wasn't the goose. But um, you'll notice, like, I had one person who actually ended up winning. Their leader was an ogre tyrant, and they could not get anyone to attack their leader unless their leader took the goose. Because people don't attack ogre tyrants, you just like try to play keep away from them, right?
Yeah.
And so he would like every game, once they felt like they knew who was going to win or like maybe how the game might play out, they tried really hard to get their leader to go take the goose because that was the only way they could get their opponent to actually attack their leader, which I thought was really interesting, kind of emergent gameplay from that. And people had a blast because the other thing that I think that Tournament Quest should do is give people cool stuff to think about once they're out of the running for tournament champion.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing we did with this tournament is we had a prize for who got the most goose points. So once you got a loss, people were going crazy to try to maximize their goose points.
Yeah.
And because some of the goose points are zero sum, right? Only one person can end the battle with the goose.
Right.
It kind of gave people an extra thing to fight about, which I thought worked really well. But this isn't the only way to do it, and it's not as spiky as I think some people would like. But I would encourage tournament organizers to kind of brainstorm your own thing. So I sent you another table of another one I brainstormed
Let's see if I have
that I'm
that.
going to do in a narrative thing, a narrative tournament that's coming up in about 3 weeks. And it's a little bit more straight down the middle. And so what
Yes,
I'm
let
doing
me.
for that tournament is I'm giving people narrative quests where they can each sort of quest that they can go on, and there's 4 different quests, will have a different sort of tournament quest that they can score points on, like a little side quest. But then there's going to be 3 other ones that people can do that everyone is going to be chasing the exact same. And my hope is that it kind of does something. Yeah, here we go. So you'll have like a faction quest that is yours and yours alone, and your opponent might have a different one. But then there's these 3 other ones. One is Gurish Bounty. You either took down the opponent's leader or took down a monster. And then Gnarled Veteran, your leader survived the battle. And then Gnarlwood Explorers is a little bit like that weird tournament quest that currently exists in the core book where you have to be on all 4 corners.
Mhm.
This one is just like a little bit less complicated. You have to be near the board edge and near the center, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and so kind of this was my hope at doing some more straight down the middle ones
Yeah.
to use as tiebreakers. Now this table is, you know, a full half the points are being done by the little side quests because it's a narrative tournament, so wins and
Yeah.
losses are less important. But
Sure.
obviously, you could do just one glory point, or just 1 point for each of these, and that would work a lot better.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing is, and I tried to do this a little bit at Nova, but I don't think I had fully fleshed out my thoughts about secondaries there. I just knew that one, I wanted to make them impactful, and so the way that happened is well, let me back up a little bit. I think whenever you do secondaries, they need to fit also within your scoring system
Mhm.
well. And I don't think that GW's scoring system that they have right now does that very well. It's like you get 20 for a major, 15 for a minor win, 10 for a draw, 5 for a minor loss, 0 for a major loss, and 1 point for your tournament quest.
Yeah.
You're like, wait, what? You know what I mean?
And the
Like
tournament quest is the hardest one to keep track of.
yeah, exactly. And so you're
Yeah.
just like it felt like it was stapled on. It was totally an afterthought. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
It was like, oh, okay, we'll just add something extra in here. And so like you need to kind of bake it in there. And so like, you know, if you want to know how the Nova scoring system was, go look back at the Royal Beast Flayers episode because I explained it there, and then we also did it in our Nova recap. But with the sliding battle points that you would get based on the victory points that you had, the secondaries mattered. If you killed their leader, that was an extra victory point. And so it
Mhm.
would affect your battle points at the end of it, right? And so the way that the secondaries, and I will be the first to admit, my secondaries weren't terribly creative. It was like, if you kill their leader, that's one. I did incorporate the GW tournament quest, but that counted as a victory point, not just like as a extra battle point that you would get at the end of your tournament, right? It was a victory point that could affect a number of battle points that you could get because of the sliding scale. And usually there was something thematic, that was going on in there. And I'm blanking on some of them, but you had the opportunity to get 3 victory points, which could push a loss into a draw. Or, if you had a tight game, it could actually give you essentially a minor victory, because of the way that, again, the sliding scale worked. And so I don't think that my secondaries at Nova Open were, again, entirely very creative. I think I could have done a better job of making it more, I guess, thematic to the game that I was playing. Like, for example, the things that you had in your Might Makes Right, and or in your Graveyards one, and also I think the Minor Victory, for example, in that other one that you had from the Hunters and Hunted booklet. I think those are like really, really good creative secondaries. But I do think that when you have your secondaries, they need to be built into the scoring system where it fits and it makes sense. And so, like, for example, because this is a narrative tournament, your scoring system here works well. Do you know what I mean? Like, it fits with what you're trying to do here.
Because your leader should be your legendary hero in a narrative tournament. Yeah,
exactly. And if you do complete your fashion quest, you should be getting a crap ton of glory for it, right? And so, like those things make sense. And so you just need to make sure that the two things I hope that people take away is, one, try not to make your secondary more complicated than your primary, and that's one. I've got more advice than two, I guess. Two, don't make your secondary counter to what your primary mission is. You know what I mean? Make it complementary there. Yeah. And then three, make sure that it fits within the scoring system that you have so that it actually matters and it doesn't feel like it's just an afterthought. So those are my three takeaways on this.
And I wanted to clarify, because you're using kind of secondary and tournament quest a little interchangeably. So you're talking about there can be a situation where the tournament quest is also part of the mission and gives points for the mission.
Right.
Or there could be points where it's just a scenario that has two scoring systems in it.
Yes.
And essentially, if I'm interpreting it right, you're saying kind of either one of these is fine. It's just like conceive of the whole thing as a package.
Right. 100%. 100%. Okay.
Yeah. And I agree with all of that then. Yes, 100%. And one like shorthand, I think, for something that has worked for me really well, because I've had ones that didn't work for me, is if your secondary objectives are focused on something that's very different, or maybe rewards something in list building that's very different than what your primary rewards, that can be really good. So if you have, a kill mission where your secondary scoring is like beyond all four quarters, and then it's like the swarm warband has an easier time doing that than the really killy warband that's hunting them down, right? Something like that. You can,
and it doesn't go against the spirit of the mission, right? Like, because being in four corners is like maybe a good thing for your band, so
right. And just something that makes it also, when you can make it a little bit more complicated for players to figure out, well, anytime you can make it easy for players to figure out what's happening and complicated for players to figure out what's really happening, like strategically what's happening, if you can make the tracking easy but the strategy hard, that's a really good situation. Like, one thing about the Rumble Pack was they introduced these other layers, these secondary objectives, things like that, and that was all really wonderful. And I think it brought Warcry forward. The problem was that as a group, they were just strategically too easy to figure out. Like, it was too easy to, I mean, like, Javi, the list you brought to ACO is just like, like, it's a middle finger to that pack, really.
Right? It was kind of the right pack. It was the right list for the pack for sure.
Yeah. And I've seen other people, do things with Soul Blight Gravelords that is really just like a middle finger to the Rumble Pack as a whole. And so, anytime you're making a tournament sort of pack, or just one mission, anytime you can make it harder to figure out how to game it with your secondary, that's usually a good thing.
Right. Yeah. It shouldn't be that you can just take one look at it and solve the entire thing in one go.
That's a better way.
And right, and the more that you can just make it possible that other lists just, all kinds of list work is just the best. Because honestly, after ACO, and even heading into Nova, I was a bit burned out on Rumble Pack stuff, like heavy objective play, stuff like that. And now, like heading into League, I looked at it, I was like, I can run a 6 model list and probably do pretty well.
Yeah.
So I just threw all the heavy hitters into a list like overnight, and I still used horns as shit, but I had a lot more fun because I was playing with, not just moving a Shatterer over.
Right.
I was like running a Myrmidon into something.
Yeah. Well, again, this is kind of tournament craft, or even like event craft type of stuff that we're talking about here. And the more that our listeners are running their own events, the more that they're thinking through this. We hope that this helps you in designing, really interesting and creative ways for people to play Warcry. I think that the creativity of the community is one of its strongest aspects. And so, we definitely want to help you. So again, this is my third pitch. If you are not in our Discord, jump in. If you've got questions about how to make good secondaries, like you've got a lot of experienced players in our Discord that you can totally bounce ideas off of. And we love giving feedback. If that's one thing that we love doing, we sure like giving advice to other people, so don't be afraid, come in and talk to us, and we love it. Thank you guys so much for listening to the show tonight. It's been a total pleasure. Javi, thank you for coming on the show with us.
I didn't get to say it in the flow of you presenting them, but we have roughly the same color scheme on our Slaanesh, and I love that so much. I hope we get to do a 2v2 tournament sometime where we can both run Slaanesh. That'd be so cool.
Yeah,
dude, I'm in for it. I'm also really hoping that the points changes that we saw earlier today like trickle down, and we get 95-point pain bringers. Just kind of makes Slaanesh a little better, a little more feasible. It's a fun warband. I really like them a lot, but they're a little overcosted.
Yeah.
And the demons are in a worse place than the mortals, are at least.
We don't talk about the demons.
Yeah. All right.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for
and
listening. Dan, thank you for being here as always. And Javi, again, thank you for being on the show. Everybody, we hope you have a good night, and we will see you at the tables.